So Elliot and I have just been having an interesting chat with somebody, and it's left us, rather than wanting to go and surf giant waves, wanting to eat a packet of waffles.
Yeah, those waffles sound delicious, Tom. So we spoke to Glyn about tow surfing, how we got into it, the town of Nazare, as well as the environmental impacts of tow surfing and big wave surfing generally and its carbon footprint. But despite his passion for big waves, I think it was the Tregroyce waffles that really excited him. I think we should go get a pack now, Tom. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm game with a cup of tea. Melting it over the tea like you and Glyn said you do.
Yeah, it's the way forward. That's a winter special, that is.
We've made it to 10, and in 10 weeks too.
For that mammoth milestone in podcasting, we're going to discuss ways that transcend the realm of mere mortals, with Wales' offering to the global big wave riding scene, Glyn Ovens.
He might have learned in Ceredigion, but now he charges Nazare each and every winter. Quite a journey, and he's telling it to Crest.
Yes, you heard it. This is the 10th episode. Double figures.
And to celebrate it, Rob has gone on a much-deserved holiday to the Scilly Isles, which means I'm joined at the presenter side of the desk again by two-time European longboard champ Elliot Dudley. Welcome, and thanks, Elliot.
No worries. Thanks, Tom. And I'm going to take the liberty, in turn then, of extending Crest's hospitality to the all-important third voice in the virtual studio today. We're proud to be able to host Glyn Ovens for today's episode. How's things, Glyn?
Hi, guys. How are we doing, all right?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, good
Hey,
to
Glyn.
catch up. It's been a while.
For sure.
We'll be hearing plenty from you shortly, but before that, a quick intro for our
I
listeners.
remember a mutual friend telling me they knew someone from Wales who was out at Nazare and charging on one of the tow days. This was a while back now, but the disbelief sits strong in the memory. A Welshman at Nazare? Surely that was someone with a loose connection to the country and not a homegrown. Such a thing couldn't be, could it?
But Tom's disbelief was indeed misplaced, and by that point, Glyn hadn't just towed into Nazare. Already an experienced practitioner in the unpaddleable realm, Glyn had notched a crazy session at Mullaghmore, as well as sessions at Mavericks. Initially, from Tal-y-Bont on Wales' central coast, such surf spots are indeed quite a step up. I first came across Glyn through Welsh legend Chris Guts Griffiths, and of mutual involvement in stand-up paddling back about 12 years ago. But it's probably about as far as you can get from the full throttle world of jet skis and wave runners. But since then, Glyn has built quite a reputation as a maestro of water safety in some of ocean sport's riskiest situations.
Put simply, Glyn's achievements in waves far beyond what we get at home have placed Wales on the map. So it's an honour to welcome him to Crest, and we're looking forward to hearing about one of the nation's wildest surfing journeys.
Thanks, guys.
First off then, Glyn, it sounds like quite a paradox, being a professional in the business of water safety and then flinging yourself into the mercy of stratospheric wave sizes. What's your life looking like at the moment, Glyn? Lockdown aside, where are you living and what's your day-to-day routine?
So, travel is a big thing with surfing and big wave surfing, and that's sort of come to a stop. So it's been a time to sort of reassess. So just staying fit, spend a bit of time doing that, and then can't really think much further than that because of no movements. I'm still in Portugal, so the season sort of ended, but there's still little swells coming in. It's still really powerful surf, so it's there's plenty to get on with and to stay familiar or like familiarly afraid, I suppose is the phrase for keeping yourself ready for when it does get a bit bigger.
In terms of the season, obviously, we all know that the Atlantic kind of can generate storms at the best of times. What would you sort of call the season down there? When does it start approximately? When would you usually aim to get there, and when would you usually leave?
It's exactly the same as back home in the UK and Wales. I look to Florida. Is Florida getting destroyed by a hurricane on their sort of annual business that goes on there? And that's the first indication of swell coming across. So we get the same swells as we do in the UK, just cut down in. Sorry, not cut down. Where the UK is obviously cut down in size, and it's a little bit more raw down in Portugal. But being far enough away from the storm, I mean, coming from mid Wales, we look for a big low pressure and a little hook in the low for sort of maybe slight offshores. Whereas here, we get the swell comes down, but the weather doesn't. So yeah, it can be from August. We've surfed in August there. It's like a really decent sized day for there. Maybe
It's August Nazare, you mean?
yeah.
Wow.
It's really hard to sort of scale it because you sort of get lost in it a bit. As in going, well, it was quite a good day, but then for that spot, but not necessarily for anywhere else. So I mean, the wave's about 50 foot high, and that's obviously
Wow.
from if I go back 20, 30 years, that's massive. But for there, it's strange how you normalize it. Yeah, so that was a decent summer size. It didn't have the energy of the winter swell, but it was still big and some big drops and no one out. But in the winter, it's brown, a bit like mid Wales when it's all churned up. But in the summer, it's blue. So it was more of like what you'd imagine riding in Hawaii would be like.
When you're obviously in sort of Portugal for the season, what would you describe your role there as a sort of professional full-time big wave surfer, or have you got you've obviously sort of a specialist in water safety? Does that take up a lot of your time while you're down there in the winter, or is it literally just waiting around keeping fit for swells?
It's a bit of a mixture. I mean, I work away in the summer mostly, and then come back for the winter. I mean, the term professional, what that actually means, is sort of a bit ambiguous. I mean, people, I think, if it's used as a term professional, as in that's what you're dedicated towards, then yes. If it's professional, as in that's what you earn your living from. I don't know how much that exists anymore. But yeah, the focus, it would be like working away and then doing a ski season, and then if there's any work. Safety work. I'll get different people come from abroad who want to. I mean, they're suitably scared, and everyone should be who goes there. It's very big and it's very powerful, and it will hunt you down. And riding the waves, the easier part. The kicking out is the most horrifying part because you kick out and sort of 8 out of 10 times there'll be a wave breaking where you've just kicked out. So there is work and people need assistance, running safety. So I've run safety for different professional kite surfers. We've had some high level foilers come. Guys also, some people, if they have the money, they want to turn up and just paddle it and get the photo and go home. And it's trying to also help people not take those people out and get themselves in a world of trouble because it's there are lots of other people who are hanging around there, and if they can make a quick buck, then they might think about trying to do that. But we had a guy who came out on a jet surf. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's like a motorized. He came out, South Coast lad. He was a nice enough guy, but it turned into the American phrase a yard sale quite quickly. Ski thing, basically everything just being destroyed on the beach. He was okay,
Wow.
but he just had a lot of carnage. And it's, I suppose you surf your local break and you see someone paddling out and you can tell by the way they carry their board or whether their legs are spread or not. You can, if you've got an eye,
what warm up they do on the sand.
Yeah, you can work it out, and you're like, and I don't know. I mean, one of the ways I cut my teeth on was a sand reef in Langland, and Guts Griffiths, who you mentioned to me, brought me onto that one because it had a little bit more juice. And sometimes people drift out from what they call low tide lefts and drift out there, like because it was quite setty. Oh, this looks quite good, and like, oh god, fresh meat, and you just oh, they haven't seen the set. Oh, they're gone, and it's like that as well. But the problem is there's more kit, and there's the skis you can get out very easily on, and you can get in there and get amongst it, and it can very quickly go south. And
it's funny though, Glyn, because I think myself, for example, I think I always grew up with the utmost respect for the ocean, and I can appreciate, as easy as you guys make it look on videos, you see it on social media. I'm 100% aware of that risk, and that sort of thing that you mentioned where you kick out, that's being the worst bit. I've had that thing where you've paddled into a pretty hefty wave and you've missed it, and then you turn around and there's like the biggest set of the days out back, and you're absolutely bricking it. But that's all part of learning to surf and earning your stripes. It's I find it hard to believe that someone would look at it and have such little respect, for the ocean, even on a 10-foot day, which compared to what you surf is pretty small, you still have a healthy respect for it. So it really surprises me that there's kind of these, pay to play kind of people out there giving it a crack.
Yeah, pay to play. Do they sort of feel as if their money entitles them to be able to get the experience?
Well, I think a little bit. I mean, that's the world we live in, isn't it? I mean, coming back to what Elliot said, to have respect, you need to understand. You respect. You can only respect something that you fully understand. But if you don't understand it, you won't respect it. And so, like people just have no idea. And if you're, I mean, Elliot, you said it quite eloquently. You understand that if it looks easy, it's actually quite difficult. So, but they miss out that bit. That because you've gone through the learning process we all have of going from. I mean, the amount of time you have to put in surfing to actually be able to achieve what we think we'd like to is phenomenal. So, but it looks super easy. Like watching tennis play, you smash it 100 miles an hour, it just throws the ball, hits it. I mean, how hard can it be? But it's the same. But you just whip me in, and I'll just surf the wave. I mean, that's it. And you pick me up, and you're like, no, it doesn't work like that, mate. And I've had people. The best analogy I've been explained is imagine downhill skiing without any lifts. If you want to ride down the mountain, you first have to learn how to mountaineer. Yeah, and surfing is a bit like that.
Yeah.
Like you can go on a foamy, but if you want to paddle out, you have to know how to read the ocean. You have to know I can turn last minute on this one. No, this one's going to break. I'm paddling out. I'll bail on this wave, or I'll duck dive, or it's not going to break at all. I'm going to hold my ground and turn and go. And that is thousands and thousands of computations every second over many, many years. And so if you don't have that, it's like, well, it's just a wave. Just put me on it. I mean, I get my photo, and we've had loads of people from different nations coming. And it's like a fine balance. If you have a very good driver, then you might be able to get away with it. But it's been used by a number of people as like a show pony, like a stunt spot.
You can see why sort of some of the purists kind of, I think, look at the sort of circus around big wave riding these days and probably kind of and frown somewhat, when you think of the sort of legends of big wave surfing, your Peter Coles, your Greg Knowles, your Ricky Griggs. They were all out and out watermen, weren't they? They surfed big waves in the winter, but they lifeguarded as well, and then all in the summer they'd be sort of diving and spearfishing. And if you've got that, they felt that they needed that kind of level of confidence and ability to even think of tackling these waves. They were completely self-sufficient, in every way. They dove for their food, and they were lifeguards, and they were 100% aware that if anything went wrong, that they were going to be their own sort of rescuer. It's quite different these days to think that you actually want, because the sort of size of the waves has got so extreme. You're 100% reliant really on the safety cover these days.
I think there was a bit of a mixed message going on in all of it. I mean, when it first came about, it was like, it turned surfing into a team sport, and that hadn't existed before. And that's probably the greatest part of toe surfing, is the fact that the other person actually wants to get you on the best wave. Whereas, if you're surfing with your closest best friends, they see them on the wave that's the best wave of the day, and like, part of you is like, if they fall, I can take this. That doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So this is totally like, I literally want to get you on the best wave. Like, no way, I want to get you on the best wave. And it's genuinely like that. And that's really rare when someone's completely got your back and actually rooting for you, whereas there's this underlying sort of destabilization of each other going on in surfing. And that was removed. And that's an amazing thing to have in a sport that you love and you can share with somebody. Then it obviously pushed it into bigger waves as well. And then you also then had more people could just get on a ski. I mean, this is exactly what I did. I saw what the guys are doing in Hawaii. I bought a ski. I had no idea what I was doing. First session ever, Crab Island with Chris Griffiths, sucked the toe up instantly. It got washed in. Only one person came to help me, Mark Cook-Jones, a good friend of mine, and he helped me get to push it along the beach for about an hour and a half in and out until we got it back to being recovered. And those people laughing, but it didn't matter. It's like I had a vision of where we're going. The story wasn't the story. The point of the story wasn't that loads of people didn't come and help. That wasn't an issue. It was just that. That's where I started thinking, I can surf good, I can drive a ski, and I couldn't, and that's been the big mistake that people have made, and it still happens to this very day. I mean, I was in a competition, and it's an aggregate of both driving, both surfing. And we did really well because we're both good drivers. We're not the best surfers. There was top pro billabong guys who were better, who surfed bigger waves, but they couldn't drive very well. So it's just a slight change. I know when there was the big push to research the paddle, to try and push the tow guys back. It was interesting because you've got these people who, if I took you tow surfing and you took lots of big waves, okay, so you knew how to ride the big wave, you knew how to find the line. All you've got to learn now is paddle and get to your feet, because you know how to ride the line of the big wave. You know how to do that. So you've got an insight. So to then shut the back door and go, shut the door behind you. Oh, sorry, yeah, we've all learned how to ride these big waves, but now no one can tow.
Yeah.
You're like, is that protectionism of your status? It's a
I know it was the Fletcher family were quite vocal, weren't they? Regarding sort of certain big wave surfers who hadn't come from a kind of a traditional surfing background.
Sure.
Yeah, and yet Herbie Fletcher was out on a jet ski in Waimea in like probably the early 80s, if not the late 70s.
Yeah, I mean he was one of the originals, wasn't
the first
he?
ever, yeah.
He started off with the ribs and stuff, and then he was out on the kind of those old school kind of.
Yeah, well, Herbie would go out on that stand up, and bear in mind you have to hold him with your hands, and he'd do rescues without a pipe. So he'd go in, you then have to hold onto his legs. He'd drag you, and he'd be holding onto the handlebars whilst dragging your weight just by his arms all the way into the beach.
But then for him to go on to criticize it, that's exactly what you're talking about, closing the door behind you, isn't it, or pulling up the ladder after you?
A little bit. No, I understand where they were coming from. No, it was more that basically saying, you start having things coming out saying this film was made without the use of any jet skis, and you're like, what? Like, really? How does this? I can't even compute what's going on there, because it's like it's so keen to step themselves aside, and yet it's like these things are a useful rescue tool. I teach training with jet skis, and first out the door, and like 90% of the owners are meatheads. Yeah,
right.
And you're never going to change that. But so you're always up against that. But
we've all seen firsthand the probably the negatives, but then again, we've also seen loads of guys have their lives saved on jet skis. We see that all the time on in at the Jaws events, or just generally in Hawaii every winter. But in terms of kind of the whole big wave thing, I mean, I've surfed up in mid Wales where you're from. There's not exactly an abundance of big wave spots. It very rarely, like the rest of Wales, very rarely gets above maybe head and a half high. How did you sort of first get down the path to big wave surfing? You mentioned the sandbar, for example, but was there anything kind of further afield that set you on that path, or was
it was? I mean, it began at home. It began in mid Wales. Used to surf the main harbour wave in the town, and although there were good waves, other waves, that picked up the most swell, and that was the only spot we had. So when I moved to Swansea, the thing that tripped me out was when Llangennith got too big, you go to a break that was smaller. And so, well, why would you do that? Why don't you just keep surfing the same spot? Which is what we basically did. So however big it was, that was what we went out on. And on the odd day, it could get a decent size. And the challenge is to ride waves that were hard to finish. My technical surfing has never been like right up there. So like enjoyed riding waves that were just you couldn't get to the end of. And whether that was like one that was sucking dry, sort of reef break, or just big because it was hard and you're trying to manage your fear. And fear is relative. I mean, I go back home and it's head high swell, and maybe a head and a half set starts coming in. I'm as nervous as I am anyway, because I want to be in the right spot. I don't want to mess it up and stop thinking, now you're thinking too much. Oh my God, I'm going to miss it. Don't miss it. Don't be too deep, all this sort of stuff. It's the same sort of fears and anxieties. But whenever I went away, because the waves weren't big at home, if there was a big day, I had to go out, because I knew I'd kick myself and I went home and I didn't try. So I went down to Swansea because there's more surfing. The sand reef was a decent taster. Used to go traveling around other parts in England as well. But we used to go to south of France every autumn. Did lifeguarding, and then when that finished, we'd go there. And so we'd go to Hossegor, and if it was big at Llanord at the back, we'd just paddle out and have a go. And
quite an accessible big wave spot, Llanord is, isn't it? You're talking about this idea that somebody can just suddenly be out there, but as long as your board is long enough, it is quite an exciting place to sort of be able to really step up in terms of size, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have the jeopardy of rocks on the inside and you've just got to hold your breath or hold your board or just not get caught, then you have a chance. I mean, for me, it's like continual learning of surfing. When you first learn, you're afraid of everything, and as you're going to bigger waves, it just carries on. So it's almost, I don't know if it keeps you young, but it keeps I've been on trips with like full pros, and they're really panicking about this and that, getting really frustrated with their performance. And then when I was touring stand-up paddleboard competition, I stayed with some guys in Huntington Beach, and they were just beginners, but they were so excited. They're so excited, and I like just giving them a couple of tips, and it was making their day. And I said, "That's the froth. That's the stoke." And so you're just looking for that and being excited, and you're like, "Oh, that was close, nearly died." Like all good stories start with, "Oh, nearly." Did I tell you about the time I nearly died? Yeah, exactly. And we like stories, and yeah.
I think you see that frustration a lot with surfers, especially ones that maybe aren't willing to change what they ride, for example, or the waves that they surf. It's very easy to become kind of to sort of stagnate, really. You're kind of, from your point of view, how has your equipment changed? I presume you started on a surfboard and then moved on to supping later on, or was it, or have you always, is it just surfing and then sup after that?
I started in the Surf Life Saving Club, and I had to go on the rescue miles, and we were told to kneel on it, and I was only about 13, and I was kneeling on it. It's like, I'm sure you're supposed to like continue and then get to your feet, and that was it. And then I bought an inappropriate shortboard, like we all did, that was too small and delayed my progression, and then started to shift around and move on to different bits of kit. And then moving to Swansea was much better because you had lots of people who were good surfers, like Chris Griffiths, and they could say, that's a piece of crap. Like, okay, fair enough, I'll take that. And what would you suggest? I think sort of shedding the sort of ego a little bit will help you improve a lot quicker. But yeah, it was shortboard and then longboard, and then I got into paddleboarding because it was a learning experience, and although it's annoying being rubbish at something when you start, it's actually really good fun when you start to improve. And like learning, I've been learning to like kite surf, for example, and that's been amazing because you improve quickly. But if you listen to everybody, like, what are you riding? I was like, I don't know. Or speak to people who really know what they're talking about, and you get good quick. And rather than going, no, I don't want that. I this is how I do it. This is my way. So yeah, just a learning experience. And then you get to a point where there's great crossover. I'm sure your longboarding, I'm sure that's made you a smoother shortboard surfer. And then definitely in your paddleboarding, you're already familiar with a really large board, long rails, and how to drive long and get speed out of those things and trim well.
I think once you've ridden a variety of boards, even from my point of view, just long boards, mid lengths, and short boards, you don't think anything. You think nothing of trying something different. My short boards are, even my shorter boards, they're so different, all of them. Different tails, different fin setups, different thicknesses, and that's just because that's like you, that's what I've always tried, new equipment, and that's always been part of my enjoyment of surfing. I actually really feel sorry for those guys that kind of that would think even widening their board by half an inch would be a huge thing, and they would really sort of focus on that, and it would ruin that, and they think, it's affecting my performance, when in reality we all know that half an inch is if anything, is going to help you probably catch more waves. But to be that sort of pernickety about your equipment would really, it must be a nightmare. I can't imagine what it's like. So yeah, I'm on your sort of on your wavelength there with trying different.
I remember seeing. I don't have a lot of time for his sort of shtick in surfing nowadays, but I remember seeing Dane Reynolds say something about how the sort of the modern shortboard is designed to give you the maximum amount of control in a particular context, like a kind of a sort of a then ASP, now WSL judging criteria context, and that if you remove that control from a surfboard, it becomes all about the joy of riding the wave again and about the glide. And I remember hearing an interview in which Dane Reynolds said that, and then very shortly afterwards taking a far from perfect log out in one of the world's famous long point breaks, and suddenly really enjoying myself because I wasn't putting performance pressure on myself. So I think that's really interesting. I kind of want to ask about equipment though, because I'm wondering about how much room there is though to add an inch or take away an inch in the kind of equipment that you're using to tow into some of these waves. And again, I wonder also, Glyn, we were talking about how you sort of stepped up, so coming from Tal-y-Bont, surfing those waves in Ceredigion, and then you've talked about having these sort of training sessions out at the sandbar in Langland. And also, I know you towed the Mixon sandbank at one point as well, near Mumbles. Then you're talking about the Nord, and I know also G-Land was a sort of a step-up wave for you along the way. And again, once you get to G-Land, then you're probably looking at that board that's going to give you that right amount of control. But then still, I suppose like a step-up board or a gun for somewhere like G-Land, that then is completely different again now to these tow boards. So what would be a kind of average length and weight tow board? How much does body weight influence what that's going to be? How do you make those decisions about what size to get one of those boards at? And how are the controls different? How do you apply weight and how do you turn those things? So how different is the equipment, Glyn?
It is. I mean, it is fairly different to big wave paddling, but compared to surfing, they're similar to shortboards, but they're like very, very different to the big wave guns. I mean, with the towing, with the jet ski, you've removed the displacement element of the board. So the displacement, so you can paddle it. And it's just a planing hull. So they're really thin, fairly flat, and narrow, so they can sit in the wave, knife in, and you can turn them.
What sort of dimensions?
So you'd be looking like under 6 feet, like 5'10" is a nice happy size. The stance is crazy wide. You just like, it's quite uncomfortable, but when you're riding, it's necessary to handle all the bumps. So your foot is, your toes and heel are almost on the rails where the board narrows at the tail.
And how would the feet placement and the strapping compare to, say, a snowboard? Is there such a thing as duck feet, or would you have a 90-degree or a 45-degree between front and back foot?
Yeah, front foot's usually 45. Some people put back at 90. Some like duck foot. It's the back foot is fairly 90-degree sort of
right
as position. Some will have them slightly turned forward.
Yeah.
But it's the strap isn't like a snowboard strap where you're locked in. Your foot still moves.
Not a binding.
No, exactly. So you arch your foot, that grips the strap, and if you wipe out, you relax your foot, the board slips away. You're not jamming your feet in.
Right.
So you can rotate your feet in the strap a little bit to help with what you need and get toe pressure and heel pressure as you go along. But then it comes down to weight. If you're dealing with physics, speed is forces mass times acceleration. So the heavier the board, you're basically charging the board up with kinetic energy, with potential energy, with the ski, and you pull hard on the rope and you let go, and that all turns into kinetic. Right. But because there's weight in the board, that will carry the speeds through the chops, and the chops are the challenge because it's big, and the chops become big, and you've got lots of bump to go through. So some guys are running full carbon boards with like 12 kilos of overall weight.
And does carbon absorb less shock than fiberglass?
Yes, it does absorb less. There's no flex in it at all.
Right.
So your knees take a beating, but it's because there's no flex, and the board flexes, you're losing energy. Right. So a flexible board will dissipate energy more, so kind of lose speed, but it's a harder ride. I mean, some of the guys out in Hawaii always sworn by wood, because you just can't beat the sort of the natural fibers, the millions of years of evolution of those trees swinging in the wind and taking shock and load.
That's something that's reflected, and I'm sure it's probably quite transferable in snowboard technology, isn't it? They even the best snowboards, even to this day, still have wood cores for that reason, don't they?
Yeah,
it's got the best flex patterns, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's sort of quite nice that you still can't beat that.
Maple or ply, isn't it?
All other tech that we've got. But so yeah, carbon is just for stiffness and strength, not for the actual to keep the board light. And then people mess around with weight, where they have it between their feet, where they have it center of effort. It's directly between your 2 feet, or slightly forward, or slightly back. And some of the more high performance guys are now moving to, these boards aren't point and shoot and run. These are for turns now. So you're now starting to actually be able to do huge turns on waves. And so you're moving into the snowboard realm,
And is that the closest sort of likeness in terms of the controls on these boards? Do they ride more like snowboards and surfboards?
I mean, snowboarding specifically, you have to have a completely balanced stance. You could be asymmetrical, you could be symmetrical front and back leg, and that's not the case with these. You're super low all the time, knees taking all the shock. Because you're going so fast, you don't really have to drive. It's about sort of engaging the forces through the rail. You don't have to work super hard and press really hard. You have to. It's hard work to control the speed and the forces yourself, but it's not like you have to work really hard to turn the board. I think it's about having good wave judgment and knowing where you can do a turn, and if you're ready to do a turn. And there's nothing that puts more fear into me is that taking off maybe slightly behind the ball and laying a bottom turn right in the pit. That's for me, that's high risk stuff, because if you slip an edge, you're in the worst spot. And so, you really have to be happy with your equipment. And with the boards, the point and shoot boards are about 16 wide. I mean, point and shoot is get towed into a bomb, aim down the line, down the shoulder, and just make it. And the ones that turn, they bring them more to sort of 17 wide to be able to go rail to rail, and they're actually using the rail to.
So that's to create more of a taper off between the middle of the board and the tail. Then is it? If it's 17 wide, there's more of a line drawn into the tail.
A little bit, but it means you can actually generate speed through turning. So you actually go faster by putting turns. Right. And also the logic is when you put it on the rail, there's less wetted area in the water, so there's less drag.
Okay.
So if the board's flat, or when you've just got an edge and one fin in, it's actually going to go quicker. And it's also going to knife through the chop because you'll cut through it. You're not slapping over them.
It's interesting what you said there, Glyn, with the nerves around the bottom turn. It's in what I'd call normal wave surfing. A bottom turn is something you practice 20 or 30 times every time you surf. Whereas if you think the number in comparison, the number of waves you catch on your toe board is pretty minimal. So it must be very hard to scale that up, if you know what I mean, from small waves up to big waves, because the equipment is only used when it is pretty serious stuff compared to.
No, you're spot on there. I mean, if we go out on small days and you might get like 30, 40 waves just back to back, we kick out, grab the rope straight away, go around, get whipped into another one, getting towed out, being whipped into another one. So you can get a lot of waves when it's small, but exactly like you said, the best way to test your big wave toe board is when it's big and you're like, yeah, okay. And so everyone gets very nervous about making adjustments. And so you can get locked into having your board not set up right, but you don't want to make a change.
Yeah. Sure.
Because you're like, if I make a change and it all goes wrong, or the board's perfect, or I destroy it, or there's so much jeopardy going on there. But yeah, you have to practice in the small stuff. But fundamentally, I mean, basic roadmap for a big wave surfer. If you're a good small wave surfer and you can manage the fear, you'll be a good big wave surfer. And the guys who are fearless, but maybe their ability isn't as good, and then maybe I'll put myself in that bracket, I'm not sure, but you'll see guys who are technically good, so they just know how to read lines and everything, and they just know how to ride waves. So
I reckon Dudley's getting tempted here a little bit.
I think
you might be getting a visit, I reckon.
I was going to mention Kai Lenny because from my sort of experience of watching big wave riding, he seems to be one of the best, really, doesn't he? Because he is such a rounded surfer. He rips in anything.
Is he controversial though? I mean, some of that kind of the aerial antics he does.
I mean, it depends. What is controversy? I mean, the kid has just learned. He's lived in straps. And so, I mean, windsurfing, kite surfing. Right. So kite surfing, you learn to be in the air all the time. You're floating, you're flying, your rotations are normal. You just get used to all the stuff that I touched on. Like I've been learning how to do loads of other multidisciplinary sports, but kiting, for example, if I do 1 hour of kiting, I do 1 hour of board riding, 1 whole hour, 60 minutes, feet in the straps, toe side, front side, back side, I'm riding. I do 1 hour surfing, I get 2 or 3 minutes of wave riding. So, imagine that over his whole life in windsurfing. I mean, just the board time, it's unquantifiable. And then, he's just doing what's fun, If you've ever done 360 in surfing before, you could do one. It was all you wanted to do. And once you've done it, done.
Yeah. They do actually feel kind of fun too, don't they? It's fun sensation. So I imagine doing it in the lip of a wave at Nazare or Jaws is probably even more fun.
You can argue it's not a functional maneuver, but neither is surfing. Oh no, it's fun. Oh, therefore it's functional. Is it fun? It's therefore yeah. So if it's fun, that's the most important part.
A lot of people lose sight of that. There's a lot of hating going on these days in surfing because of the kind of the diversity, I guess, and the range of equipment being ridden. But that's what I have no issues. I always say to people, I have no issues with anyone in the water as long as they're having fun and they're not endangering anyone. That's kind of my golden rule. Really.
Yeah, no, precisely. I mean, in our team, my latest endeavor has been foiling, doing a lot of foiling, and that is just another level of challenge, and it forces you to relax, and you have to be very, very gentle and subtle and calm, and it's minute movements. And my tow partners are like, foiling looks dangerous. I'm not going like that. It's got a big razor on the bottom. That's too dangerous. And I was like, oh, you're surfing without any fins on your board today, are you? So what do you mean? He said, come on. But basically, rather than going, oh, we're going surfing, it's now, right, we're going wave sliding. So I'll bring my foil, the other guy's going to paddle, he's going to tow, and it's irrelevant. Everyone's riding waves and everyone's having a great time. And
in terms of foiling, I think one of the kind of one of the things we've got, there's a few guys that do it locally. One of the amusing things, we joke about is that the foiler usually wears the helmet when in fact it's the rest of the water probably that need the helmet in that situation. But I think where we are, it's quite densely populated. Most spots are crowded. In my opinion, most of the spots that you see foilers at aren't particularly well suited to foiling. I presume where you are, there's a lot of kind of big bommies and crowded beaches for you to do it on. Because I know in Hawaii, they tend, a lot of the guys, the kind of the Florences, they foil, and they talk quite a lot about going. They're always at places where there are no other surfers, but then they have an abundance of spots to do it at. Is that something? What are your thoughts on having foils in a sort of a normal lineup where there's other surfers?
It's totally unnecessary. So the place I surf, I'm guilty. I ride a helmet because I have had the foil in my head before, and I've suffered this from paddleboarding. So in Portugal, it's all full on shortboarding. It's shortboard. So I turn out in the paddleboard, everyone's giving me abuse straight away. It's like, yeah, I'm used to this. It's like, look, I'm going to surf here, you're going to surf there. We're not going to be anywhere near each other because it's a bigger piece of kit, and they associate them with kooks. Same with foiling. The little beach that I surf on in the winter when I'm here, I have to work really hard because I want to surf that break. So I won't go and surf where anyone else is. If someone paddles out inside of me, and I have to stop surfing because I don't want to go anywhere near them, and I try and surf a wave where there's no one at because I want to keep surfing there. So fundamentally, I believe you're right. They allow you to go out when it's rubbish. They allow you to go out where you don't go out on a shortboard. Like I won't take my stand-up paddleboard when it's piping double overhead barrels, because that's not the right equipment. And yeah, I can ride a foil in the pocket quite deep, but it doesn't mean I have to. So it is a shame that people do come out and feel the need to go through all these different people. And to the crowd, there's plenty of awful waves for shortboarding, and it's perfect for foil. I mean, the downwind stuff, they're now so efficient you can ride ocean swells. That's really exciting. And we talked about having not much time on the board, not much board time, or feet in the wax, or however you say it. These allow you to do that, and it really, really. I think in France, like in Anglet, they banned it, and so straight away you've got a few people doing ridiculous stuff, and I can't seem to understand why people need to prove themselves by slicing through a crowd of surfers.
Yeah, it doesn't cry logic. You've sort of touched on it a bit already, really, in terms of your experimentation with different types of equipment, kite surfing, foiling, sapping. Do you have a specific training program, or is it literally just spend as much time in the water as possible, riding as much different kit? I mean, do you follow any kind of apnea training, free diving, that kind of thing? Do you do any extra cardio, or is it really just time in the water?
Time in the water is a primary one, as long as it's mixed discipline. I think if you're doing one sport, I mean, normal surfing is just one way, so you end up with your rear calf is bigger than your front calf. You have, over the lifetime, you get like twisting wear on your spine and things like that. So doing sports where you can go both ways is quite good. A bit of cycling. As far as the apnea stuff, I try and be really, really fit. So that when I need to preserve my oxygen in my blood, I don't have a big demand on it. And I've worked with a couple of sort of sports sciences guys. Everyone has their thing, and you basically just have to have something that you're happy and sits comfortable with you. Long-term breath hold. I'm not, you can hold your breath for 3, 4, 5 minutes, but in my resus stuff, that if someone you don't resuscitate them after 6 minutes, they start suffering brain damage. So I don't really want to go anywhere near those sorts of times as far as holding my breath. So I think I have done apnea courses, and they are really, really good because you get comfortable being uncomfortable. So if you hold your breath for a long time, you start convulsing. It's incredibly uncomfortable. And if you can get used to that, then when it happens, you're like, well, I've been here before. And I think that primarily for the mental training, it's that. And the physical one is just active every day, and just don't eat crap. So yeah, junk food and stuff like that is probably not ideal. But that said, you still have to eat. But no, I don't have like a really, really strict program.
I know I've been watching Ian Walsh quite a lot, some of his training videos, and it's quite interesting what you mentioned. And this is, I've spoken to a few kind of personal trainers that specialize in surfing. And that's the big one, is that unilateral thing. Most surfers have real imbalances because, like you said, they only ever, they put most of their strain on their back leg, and they're only rotating the one way. So yeah, that's one of the things, having watched that, I've always done kind of a lot of unilateral stuff myself, really, to kind of get rid of those imbalances. Is there any kind of, do you have like a gym program that you follow, or is it just kind of?
There's a good friend of mine. He's a personal trainer in Aberystwyth, actually, and he built me a little program. But I mean, I think he talks about there's only like 8 real movements that you have to do, and so it's just shoulders and posture, and core. So I mean, the standard basic sort of weightlifting exercises that you get taught in the gym are almost all you need to do. But we get bored, so you create loads of little tools and gadgets, gizmos, to try and make it less boring. But just strengthening the shoulders, because they end up rounding a lot all the time. Abs, because you're pulling on the rope a lot, and a little bit of neck work as well. Keeping I think when you get to the really big waves, you've got to. I don't have the physique that I think would be ideal, but the pretty solid, maybe not as flexible muscle guy with a huge thick neck. Think of Laird Hamilton or someone. When you're taking these forces, they're so great. We always think, I want to be light and flexible. I don't want to be flexible. You snap. I don't want my knee dislocating because I'm too flexible. I'd rather have some muscle around it. So I think, like, surfing jaws in board shorts is way more scary than, say, surfing Mullaghmore in a 6mm wetsuit and with loads of flotation, because at least you've got something to try and keep your body together. And as you get older, if you get injured, it takes longer to heal. And then it's harder work to get back to where you were. So I think, prevention is just, as long as you're doing something every day. Then
interesting what you said about the it's a fine line between that kind of the strength to be able to handle the beating in the same way, say, a rugby player would we all know how much bigger rugby players are these days, due to the impacts they take, and it's similar with big wave surfing. Really, you do have to be pretty solid in certain respects, but then it's that flexibility. You can't lose that, because that can then, if an arm's being wrenched back, say, and you haven't got that shoulder flexibility, that can in itself cause an injury. So it must be it's a fine line to tread. It's one that I probably think I'd struggle with, actually, especially.
It's also interesting to hear you guys talk about where a training program is relevant to improve performance, and where a training program is relevant to keep you safe or to prevent the chances of injury. Because I suppose there's kind of a dual purpose there, isn't there? There's training to actually survive a bad outcome on a wave, and then there's training to get that board off the bottom and reduce the chances of the bad outcome.
Yeah, fully. I mean, I think that's what happens as we age, isn't it? You want to be the peak performance, and then you're like, I want to maintain this level. I don't want it to detract. I had a birthday card sent to me once, and it just said it was about swimming, because I mean, swimming, I think about it, is probably the ultimate training for, as far as I'm concerned. Just
I agree.
No risk.
I do too.
I mean, if I had my way, so the world's worst one is running, but most accessible. The most least accessible is swimming, and it's the best one for you. So if it was free swimming pools for everybody, it would be a lot easier. But yeah, low impact, really familiar. You can do underwater breaths. You can simulate all of it, and you come out tired. But yeah, really, really good. But the birthday card. Go on, Elliot.
I always find it funny with the swimming though. It's people, because I've sort of my background with doing triathlon and other things. People always ask me about fitness for surfing, and they all want to avoid swimming for some reason. They all want some fancy gym routine that they can do, or some new, CrossFit, or something that's a bit more interesting.
Yeah.
But the hands down 100% best thing you can do to keep you fit for surfing is swimming. I'm
100% agreeing with you, but I'm also 100% agreeing. It's literally the most boring thing you can do. It's like, it's so mind-numbing. But if you get to a point where you can maybe improve your times a bit. I mean, I retrain as a lifeguard every year, and that's a great target to make sure I hit my times and start to improve and all that sort of stuff. That's really good. But you were saying about that was it. I had a card.
What the card say? Yeah.
It says it had a swimmer on the front, and it said sometimes you swim to stay fit. Other times you swim to stay alive.
Yeah, wise words, I reckon. That's actually quite a good point to bring up the place that has been sitting in the background of a lot of this conversation. A place that people obviously have to sort of train and prepare themselves psychologically for. Nazare. It's a question that I think often gets kind of taken for granted when they talk to people about the actual wave. But what's the sort of experience of the place like? What kind of town is Nazare? Where do you ride out from? How long does it take to get from the harbour to the wave? What's it look like when you're out to sea, looking back at land? Just tell us about the place a little bit, Glyn.
So Nazare is a small fishing village split into two areas. There's the upper part, which is called Sitio, which is up on the cliff, which is where the Farol is. The Farol is the lighthouse that you see in all the iconic shots. And then the lower part is Nazare town. Now, to the south of the Farol, which you see in the imagery, is the trench, the really deep water trench, which is continental depth. So basically deep ocean depth water coming right the way to the shore. And what that does, that funnels swell. And it funnels swell down it, and then when it gets near the shore, it bends away, and bends away to the beach called Praia do Norte, which is basically North Beach, which is where we do all the big wave surfing. Now, where that trench continues to the beach, there's a little keyhole where the waves don't break, even when it's huge. And that's where the fishermen used to go out, and they'd row out from there and go fishing. So they still do all the traditional fishing from there, but now it's out of the big harbour, which is just to the south, which is where we launch our skis, and we drive across about 15 minutes. It's very easy. It's a deep water harbour, so all weather, rarely ever closes, and one of the few all weather harbours along that stretch of the coast. So when it's huge, we can still get out, and the fishing still carries on in the village. And you've got lots of traditional. They do the fish drying, and I mean the whole place is steeped in history about respect for the sea and lost lives. And the Farol used to be a fort where they used to protect the town from ravaging pirates who'd come in. A lot of them were from the sort of Nordic. And if you see a Portuguese woman with blonde hair there, they'd say she was like the descendant of of one of the Vikings, of a pirate's offspring. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, the people there are very friendly. They're very accommodating. But it's also become a little bit of like sort of a rill of tourist resorts. So in the summer, it's absolutely packed. The South Beach has got a huge cliff that protects it from the prevailing northwest winds. So everyone's there. We have a lot of wind in the summer. And so people want it as hot as they can get it. And that's where they do. So it's all bed and breakfast, all packed out. So it used to be very quiet in the winter. And now it's picked up a bit because of the surfers, and people travel there to come and see the big waves. And it's got like a mystical a legend about the king was chasing a deer, and the deer jumped over the cliff, and the horse that the king was on was going to do the same, and this saint came out and stopped the king's horse and saved the king, and that's the Lady of Nazare. And so there's a pilgrimage for people to come to that. So there's quite a lot of different things going on there.
Sounds like quite an interesting place. It's funny you mentioned people going up there to visit. My a friend of mine, his nephew lives down on the Algarve. He's from Wales originally, but yeah, if there's a swell at Nazare, his dad takes him out of school and drives him up there. So it's become a bit of a kind of a tourist attraction in itself, just for the big waves, which is
fully. And in the Ferrol is now a big museum with all big wave surfers boards there, and there's like a 3D topographical map of the bottom to understand how the swell comes in. And I mean, basically the swell marches in at full speed, and when the swell opposite the beach feels the beach, that part of the wave slows down, whereas the part that's above the trench is still running at ocean speed. So basically that section starts to overtake. So you have this bending effect where it then bends, and the beach is shallow to the north, the trench is to the south.
That causes the A-frame then, yeah?
And that makes it bend in hard from the south and then cross up the beach. And that's how you have those wedges.
Wow.
And that's what makes it so special.
So we've all seen sort of some of the some famous big wave surfers who sort of ended up on the wrong side of that wave you just mentioned. Maya Gabera, Alex Botello, and obviously a local sort of, well, relatively local from North Devon, Andrew Cotton, who had that horrific wipeout where he got launched. Looked about 25 foot in the air out of the whitewater. I believe you were there, Glyn, and you witnessed that.
Yeah, that was a really, really decent sized day. I think some giant waves came in that day. We were hosting a professional kite surfer who'd come from Hawaii to ride some of the waves there, and we were just walking him through the beach, just showing him this is where we'll get you if you get washed in, this is where you don't want to be, such and such. And we saw him drop into this wave. We saw Andrew Cotton drop into a wave, and it looked like he was hunting for the barrel, but it's such a twitchy wave, Nazare, and sometimes it barrels, sometimes it doesn't, and on that occasion it didn't, and he just got caught slightly in the wrong spot, and the rest is that. I mean, I don't know how he broke it, whether he broke his back when he landed from being bounced or whether when it hit him, but yeah, I mean, static water, 1 cubic meter in size, weighs a ton, so imagine that moving, and then lots of them. It's amazing how we don't get more injured by impacts with the waves. I don't know why, but we just
you've just touched on something I was going to mention there. It's it's always been, they're not even just big waves from 1 foot to 100 foot. It always baffles me how there aren't more injuries within surfing. Whether it's the super crowded day at Llangennith where people are ditching boards all over the shop, to the day at Jaws where there's 20 guys out towing in and it's carnage. Touch wood, obviously we don't have more of them, but it always amazes me that surfing kind of remains relatively injury free. So
I don't know whether it's something to do with our bodies are made up with like whatever percent, 80-90% water, and whether somehow that's got something to do with it. It's a theory that was thrown at me once. I have no idea why, but if we replaced the waves for trees, big trees falling on us, we'd be like at the same weight.
Yeah.
We'd be
or even snow. When you think how many people come back from a ski trip with a broken bone, it happens all the time. Maybe it's the experience side. Most people go on a ski trip once a year for a week, and they've got relatively little fitness and experience.
I think it's also the reason why surfers then go and get themselves in trouble when they go to snow or when they go and play football and things like that. Because they sort of
stay away from the park, gentlemen.
Yeah, forget that the normal ground hits back hard when you fall on it.
Exactly.
Other big wave spots that you've been to, Glyn, Mullaghmore, where you won the Billabong tow session in 2011 with Peter Conroy in pretty giant conditions. Mavericks, Aileen's as well in Ireland. Is there a kind of a general vibe that these spots have? A kind of that same sort of atmosphere, or are they each quite unique, and does each of them take a bit of getting used to?
Oh yeah, they each take a lot of getting used to, for sure. I mean, it helps if you've got friends who are your peers who you surfed with, and you see them doing it, like, well, yeah, I want a piece of that. And it's getting there. It's managing the fear. I mean, I have a simple strategy, and that is that I will go out and I say to myself, I don't have to surf today. So you take all that anxiety away, because that's what used to wreck me. Like, oh God, what happens now? I'm going to catch a wave, and then what if I fall, and then have I trained enough, and all this sort of stuff. You go out, you look at it, and you go, I don't fancy it today, and that's fine. And you have in your memory that you've done that before. Go, I just don't feel it today. And then sometimes you sit out there for 3 or 4 hours and go, oh God, I want it so bad. And then you've got the confidence to go for it.
Does any one of these spots stand out as a sort of favourite?
They each have something different. I mean, Aileen's is a classic, beautiful wave that on the right day, it can be like a 2-foot roll into like a cavernous 15-foot barrel, of which has eluded me. Although I used to put a bit of time in there, but haven't been there for a long time. Mullaghmore is just nasty, sketchy, but amazing. They all have that fear factor, and I can. It's the best surf sessions I ever had are with my friends, and everyone's laughing. And it might be 50 foot, it might be 2 foot. It's the big wave element is just an extra dynamic, but it's still rooted in the love of surfing from when you began.
You sort of touched on it there, really, with the different spots that you've obviously surfed and towed at. Explain to us the logistics of traveling. I think we've all traveled with surfboards. It's difficult enough. I presume that you generally don't travel with a jet ski unless it's maybe from Wales to Ireland, for example. Do you ever transport them, or is it more more often the case that you're riding a ski that is already in the location? And if so, can there be differences between skis that can make it slightly tricky to get used to sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. UK Ireland was a drive, and then we got to a point with the ski on the ferry, and then we get to a point where maybe if you're going to do 3 or 4 trips a year, maybe more, it's worthwhile maybe going in with somebody there locally to have a share in a ski. So there's one when you need it, if you need it. Generally, there's only 2 main brands of skis, and they do handle differently. So you need to know which one you want to work with. So basically, like Apple or Android, that sort of difference. You either like one or the other. They all operate pretty similarly within either all the Apple ones, which is the Sea-Doo, or the Android, which would be like the Yamaha, or vice versa. And typically, you want them left as stock. So you don't want any modifications on them, because they're going to tire the engine, and you get gains, but you also get losses. So you can get it more powerful, but then it uses more fuel. And it tires something else out. You can get a bigger impeller, which is like an internal propeller that gives you more drive at the bottom end, but you've got no top end speed. That would like changing the size of the wheels on your car. You put little wheels on, you accelerate really quickly, but your top speed's rubbish. Or the other way around with giant cart wheels, top speed's huge, but it's terrible off the mark. So typically, no, that they're all standard. They all come from the same factory. And nowadays, it's logistics. It's a big difference from just walking down with your board. Maybe really simplistically, 60 years ago, no leash, wooden board, carry it down, paddle out, have a few waves. Now it's like, go get the ski, go get the fuel, all that sort of stuff. So it can be pretty full on. And again, you need a team to share the load.
Do you have to be mechanically minded at all?
It helps.
Something that you can do yourself, or are they pretty simple to fix and maintain and that?
The older ones, it helps. I mean, on my journey, I realized I had a big gap in my knowledge, and I went and worked at a place in Sheffield, of all places, that rebuilt skis from scratch and cut my teeth mechanically. The modern ones are like modern cars, plastic with plug a computer in, and the computer says no, or it shows you the dollar sign, meaning you've got to pay a lot of money to repair it.
Yeah.
But a basic understanding of mechanics will, of course, help, and help you understand if something's wrong. Because if it breaks, you can't push it home like a motorbike if the chain comes off. If it breaks, it's a more tricky situation. So you do have to be on it with your maintenance and making sure everything's good. So it isn't like, it's basically for an hour surf, it's 2 hours of work, hour before setup, hour after. And it is when you're learning, like any sport, it's a real off-putter, because it's a lot of work for not a huge amount of return. But as you get better, your wave count goes huge, the fun factor is high, and you can get some big waves hopefully in the mix as well.
Now, we've all probably, we've all been in the water when there's been, jet skis out there. You've always, one of the sort of things that kind of, I think, sort of frustrates a lot of surfers is when they are out there is the kind of petrol smell. There's obviously that kind of environmental side of it. Ultimately you are burning fossil fuels to power the jet ski. But then on top of that, I guess with the big wave sort of world tour and most big wave surfers sort of chasing winter around the world, there's the travel element of it. Is that something that you just sort of have to accept, or are there ways that either yourself or other big wave surfers are mitigating that, offsetting carbon, that kind of thing, or trying to minimize their carbon footprint? Is that something that kind of crops up in the big wave
Not
world?
many people talk about that, I think, because to be into riding giant waves that could, inverted commas, potentially kill you, you really have to be quite sort of focused, whether that's narcissistic or self-centered or driven. There's many different ways of describing it. So to have that, that's the uncomfortable truth of humans that move around a lot. We move around and we chase things, and everything is made of hydrocarbons and plastic and fuel and stuff like that. So, I mean, ironically, usually people who've achieved everything they want to achieve can then be in a position where they think they should be more responsible. But when you're in the middle of actually trying to get to where you want to go, you were like, I want to get there no matter what. So it can be quite hypocritical to say, I've done a lot of these things now, and now I'm trying to maybe cut down on the amount of flying. But unfortunately, or fortunately, that choice has been taken away from us right now. But so it's very difficult to. I mean, you could say, oh, right, well, I've got solar panels on my house, so now I can fly. Anything that you can do to reduce is better, and there's always going to be someone who will do less than you and therefore have a lower impact. And it's pretty complex to have a decent straight answer. I suppose that there isn't one really.
I think the honest answer is actually the better one, the one you've given, really. I think to try and it's a reality of the sport, isn't it? So I like what you said about the hypocrisy as well within surfing. There's a lot of people that have made a career in surfing through traveling and their amazing photo trips to far off places, and then once they've got the following and the sponsorship, then decide they will then go and I'm going to reduce my carbon footprint and stay at home. But they can do that because of what they've done before. So that's something that I've noticed a lot over the last few years. Taking the moral high ground once you've already kind of trampled over the low ground. You know what I mean? So.
I mean, I'd say that like I would say I've been learning to kite surf, and that's made out of the kite's made out of different technology that come from China and this sort of stuff. But that's as close as it's got to sort of almost tow surfing. I'm basically wakeboarding with the wind, and that's been pretty good. I just get to the beach with a little backpack, blow it up, and go out. And I'm getting the same amount of training and the same amount of water time, and my legs are getting stronger. And it's you go both ways, front and back side, switch, and all that sort of stuff. That's been really, really good. And it means I don't have to get in the car and put fuel in the ski. And that has been replacing the number of sessions I'd go out.
And I suppose wind as well is the ultimate renewable source of propulsion, isn't it? And in fact, it's what creates waves in the first place,
exactly. I mean, it's to reduce to zero would be the ultimate thing, where you basically do nothing or don't exist. That would be the lowest impact you could have. Yeah. But whilst you're existing, I mean, you try to mitigate. But I think not getting to the point where you're saying, I'm really good because I do this. Just like, I'm trying, I could do more. I know that, and I'm not going to say you should do more or less, but just leave it at that sort of thing.
Interesting. And you mentioned then that you said it's taken out of our hands at the moment. Perhaps we'll finish here by trying to make good of that unfortunate situation that we're in. Let's just turn our thoughts to home here for a last question for you, Glyn. Let's get all dreamy here now. Home. We probably don't come across Ceredigion's best spots as often as I would like to, and I know Elliot, you go up there sometimes as well, but they're often tricky spots to get. Let's just fantasize, imagine it for us, please. Describe a dream day of surfing home. What does it look like? Where are you? How big is it? Can you tell us where you are? How big is it? What's the weather like? Who's with
you? You wake up and it is raining really, really heavily, and then we know that the wind is in the correct direction.
Right, okay. Of course, the southeasterly.
Or it might be. And then it's dark, and we drive to one of the spots that we enjoy surfing, and you drive there when the waves aren't breaking. And you have in the car, you have one packet of Tregroyce waffles. I don't know if you had them, the toffee waffles, mandatory. Everyone thinks they're Welsh, but they're not. They came from a guy from Belgium, but we've adopted them. They're Welsh now, so we're keeping them. Pencada Welsh cakes, and these aren't because they're sort of like nostalgic. These are absolutely love them. So they're in the car, and then you drive down and you go surfing. You get changed, you're soaking wet and blown around, and you probably get 2 surfs out of it. Trying to surf with no gloves, because you hate gloves, and gloves make you too tired. Well, they do for me anyway. And it would just be, it's long waves. When I moved to Swansea, I couldn't surf the waves there because I wasn't used to taking off and not knowing which way to go. So having grown up on reef breaks and point breaks, you take off, guaranteed wall. So then you start surfing, whereas Langland was more challenging. So you know that there's going to be a wall, and like there's waves there that I'll test my new normal wave surfboards always. And you finish at the end of the day if you had a couple of surfs, and you go home and you sit by the fire and you have a cup of tea and you have Marmite on toast because you've already eaten all your Tregoris waffles and Welsh cakes, and absolutely knackered. But because it's winter, it's dark at 4:30, so you get home early and you can have a nice night's sleep, and then you go again. And when I was about 19, I was a student in Swansea, and I ended up driving up overnight because I had to work every day. I worked in a nightclub, and I had to drive up every night after work, and I did that for 2 weeks straight. I had waves every day, and it was Tregoris waffles, Welsh cakes, tea, and Marmite.
I reckon that's the best answer to any question we've ever posed to anyone in our 10 show history so far.
I agree.
I have to say, you've left me without too many regrets that I haven't yet been whipped into a water mountain at either Nazare or Mullaghmore, Glyn. Although I'm not sure if that was the objective either, to be fair, but you've definitely given me a strong sense of hiraeth for Ceredigion again. I can't wait to get back up there, and hopefully we'll share some of those fabled lineups again in the not too distant.
Water.
Yeah. In the meantime, can I say a massive thanks for taking the time to speak with us? You've been a great
It's been a pleasure, guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I also can't say I'll be asking you for a tow lesson in Nazare any winter soon. I've enjoyed the insight you've given us into such a challenging aspect of our sport, one that I'm fairly ignorant to. It seems surfing is always offering new challenges, and it's great to hear from someone with such a versatile range of ocean experiences. I'm always into expanding horizons, so whether it's a lesson, perhaps a foil lesson, or some as yet unknown attempted feat of water madness, hopefully we'll cross paths again soon too. Now, listeners, if you've enjoyed this 10th episode of Crest, then do please tell a friend. And make sure you've hit that subscribe button, be it through YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. We're also always up for reading tales submitted via our email, which is castcrest@gmail.com, as well as hearing any feedback you may have about our existing list of episodes. We're also contactable through Instagram, where you can follow us to get up-to-date info on future guests and episodes. And on that note, Tom's going to tell us a little something about who's coming up next.
Thanks, Elliot. Well, it's someone you've already acquainted yourself with on Crest duty. You've heard the pair of tales he told for our Nightmare Travel episode, but we've negotiated a trip to the Garden Studio for none other than one of the country's best-known faces, Llantwit Major's Mark Vaughan. He's already been told to get an opinion ready for the jock culture debate that kicked off at the end of the Gwen Spurlock episode, and I'm sure you'll have plenty to say on that and other contemporary issues to do with surfing's place in the world, and indeed Wales's place within surfing.
And vice versa.
Indeed. So do tune in for that one. It's going to be a belter. Expect good tales, useful tips, and heated debate. Until then, thanks for listening, and see you soon. Diolch am gwrando a gwelwch chi'r tro nesaf.
Ta-da!